Today we are joined by Ian Fraser, Executive Director of Run Ottawa, and he'll be speaking to the experiences he's had and the lessons he's learned from working with sponsors to produce the Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend. You will hear many of the strategies and tactics outlined by Jenny Mitchell in our previous episode are actually ones that are applied by Ian and his team. Through his presentation, you are able to see how those best practices come to life in a practical sense with one of Ottawa's largest special events. Born and raised in Ottawa, Ian is a graduate from Carleton University. He is the former owner and partner at Somersault Events, Human Power Performance, and Psychologic, a multidimensional entrepreneur with a long history of community engagement and advocacy. Ian has volunteered for the board of OCISO, Not-for-Profit Housing Corporation, the Wellington West BIA, and is currently on the board of Invest Ottawa. Here is Ian and some of the key lessons he's learned while working with sponsors.
Hi, I'm Ian Fraser. I'm the Executive Director at Run Ottawa, and thrilled to be able to talk about our partnership and sponsorship experiences, both historically and as we go forward, probably most importantly, post-pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, I think we had a stable event horizon and event platform within the run event world. We were quite successful in bringing on long-term partners locally. We've worked with Tamarack Homes for a number of years. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, most of our partnerships had a natural end to their contract life. So at one point, we had both Scotiabank and Tamarack Homes as our two co-title sponsors. And both of those arrangements expired during the pandemic. And we went through the process of looking at how we were going to renew one or both of them, or if either of them would be interested. And I think one of the things that we'd never done as an organization before, because we'd experienced such great success through the running boom that happened in the early 2000s, was bring on somebody on board to spearhead our partnership and sponsorship program. So we put a more professional face on the outreach portion of what we did to garner sponsors and partners. And that person that we brought on board was able to do a number of things early on. And this will tie into how we looked at renewing or looking for new title sponsors for our flagship event, which is Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend. So, I think one of the first and most important things for all organizations, festivals, events to think about when they're looking at bringing any kind of a sponsor on board is looking at your organization as a store, really, that has inventory in it. So what sorts of things are in your store that you can potentially sell to a potential sponsor or partner? So what does that look like? There are many different ways to get involved with our organization. There are all kinds of different levels that you can get involved. And I think making sure that you have this inventory to take with you to any given meeting that you're looking to engage in. And certainly when you're looking at bringing on a title sponsor or a major partner, then that inventory that's available is going to look considerably different than if you're bringing on a small local partner who might just want to get involved with your event or your organization in a very small, very budget focused way. So these are two very, very different things that play into the question around sponsorship and partnership. So when we looked at the arrangement that we'd had in place prior to the pandemic, we noted that we had these two co-title sponsors. And I think in our case, that arrangement was a little bit awkward, and it was a little bit I would say it probably lacking in full benefit to either of those co-title sponsors. One of them kind of shared an overarching sponsorship for our entire race weekend. Another one really took on a piece that was oriented to the Sunday events that we put on. So in our case at Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend, we have two distinct days to what we do from an event standpoint. We have a 2K, a 5K, a 10K, and a kids run on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we have the half marathon and the full marathon on the Sunday. So we kind of carved those days off a little bit pre-pandemic and created a space and a relationship for both Scotiabank and for both Tamarack Homes. When we approached our title sponsorship void during the pandemic, knowing that we were going to have an end to the contractual process at that point, we made a tactical decision that we wanted to try to have only one title sponsor. We wanted one organization to take on everything and to be fully embedded in everything that we do, from the opening of registration until the last detail of race weekend is finished up and tied up many, many months later. It also helped us look at really simple things like, how do we design colors? How do we design branding? How do we make that work with one sponsor as opposed to two? Those are simple things that you kind of don't think about, but they're really, really important when you're going to market and you're rolling out your marketing plan throughout the arc of your event horizon. So we started to engage Tamarack Homes first, and they were our first choice to go to because they'd been such a good partner for 5 years prior to that. And, we said to them, look, Scotiabank may not be interested in coming back, but we wanted to have a conversation with you first. We wanted to see if you were willing and able to take on the full role as title sponsor, understanding that it's going to cost you more money than when you shared that with Scotiabank. And it was interesting how we sort of got to a new agreement with Tamarack. We learned early on that they were a little bit hesitant to spend a lot of extra money, but at the same time, if they were going to spend it, and this was a little counterintuitive to us at that time, what they really wanted was a really long-term arrangement. So they weren't interested in doing something over 3 years for sure. Definitely 5 years, maybe, but what they really wanted was something longer. They wanted something in the maybe 7 to 10 years. And there are a couple of strategic reasons on their side for that. During the arc of a potential 10-year contract, that would signal a leadership change within their organization. And so they thought that one strategic direction that would last up to 10 years would carry them through to a leadership change within a large family-run business. So it dovetailed well with their own internal strategies and long-term growth plan. And for us, it meant really incredible stability. It also gave us an opportunity to play around with price a little bit. So instead of having a contract, and just so spoiler alert, we did sign a 10-year contract with Tamarack Homes as our sole title sponsor, but it also gave us the ability to play around with price a little bit. So we could go in and we could say, okay, well, is this a fixed price across year over year over a 10-year arc, or is it one number over 10 years, and we can play around with how much we do in any given year? And I think that gave them a little bit of a comfort level. So we have an escalating scale within the contract, which pays us a little more incremental each year over the next 10 years. Now, really, that's probably a reflection of inflation, of increased costs, and some uncertain horizons on what our cost needs would be. So that kind of secured us in a position where we had a long-term title sponsor, which we could count on for that block of revenue. And what we were really careful to do within that arrangement was to make sure that we were able to offer extremely great value to our title sponsor. And I'll talk a little bit later about what it is we're looking for in an arrangement that works really, really well. But this gave us the ability also within the contract to bring in supporting partners, supporting sponsors, or in the running world, we call them presenting sponsors. So remembering we have one overarching event called Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend, and underneath that, we have a number of different sub-events that we roll out over the 2-day weekend. Tangentially, we also have a health and fitness expo that serves as a race kit pickup hub for our race operations, our event operations, but also we bring in vendors for our expo there. So that's kind of like a separate event that we run, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But effectively, we now had these sub properties underneath. So we had each of the individual events that we could then offer to prospective partners. So for example, we brought in ASICS running shoes as the presenting sponsor for our 2K and our 5K event. So they have their own unique set of deliverables and exposures that they get sitting underneath the Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend banner, but they're a presenting sponsor. We also worked really hard to bring on some more local partners. So we brought on Autos, BMW, Subaru. We brought them in as our presenting sponsor for our 10K. And then we thought, we had an arrangement with a bank pre-pandemic. Wouldn't it be good if we could get a financial institution or an insurance company interested in what we do? We thought the conversation starter would be really easy to have because we've already worked with a financial institution, and sort of a perfect storm happened where we had just a casual conversation with somebody from Desjardins Financial Group. And within about a month, they were interested in getting involved. And so kind of late in probably early 2022, getting really close to needing to get everything in place for Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend 2022, we brought on Desjardins as a presenting sponsor for our half marathon on Sunday. And Desjardins was also interested, along with Autos, of being more involved with some of the other events that we put on throughout the year. We do put on about 12 small events throughout the year, and both of those partners wanted to be involved in that aspect of what we do. And interestingly enough, Tamarack Homes is owned by the Taggart family, and they also own another home building unit called Tartan Homes. And so it was a really nice natural fit to bring Tartan Homes in to be the presenting sponsor for the Ottawa International Marathon. So now we have this structure where we have this overarching title sponsor, and underneath it, we have a series of presenting sponsors who get certain things, but not some of the things that our title sponsor gets. So just want to go back a little bit and talk about who we approach, how we approach, and what things we're looking for in a relationship. So if I look at our title sponsor and how that conversation would go, we have a unique relationship with our title sponsor. So they don't really ask for any activation. So they're not looking for us to, for example, build a model home on site and have people tour through it as a tool for selling houses for Tamarack. In fact, they take a completely opposite position. They do not want us to sell anything on their behalf. So for example, they don't have booth space at our Health and Fitness Expo. They have no staff on site handing out literature or doing anything like that. What they want, plain and simple, is their name on absolutely everything that we touch and everything that we do, and 2 or 3 hues of this iconic green that they use as being part of our color palette, and they want it everywhere. And early on, we sort of had, especially our partnership sponsor that we brought on, to our partnership consultant that we brought on to help with this process. He was a little confused. He's like, well, why? We could do so much more for them. And, after many conversations, we realized that what they really wanted was they wanted a demographic that was between 25 and 40 years old to think about buying a home maybe in 5 or 10 years down the road. And they wanted that person to come back and participate in our event every year, and to just have that impression in their mind year after year that when the light bulb goes off in 7 years and it's time to buy a new house, the first thing that's going to pop into their head viscerally is Tamarack. And that's their sole goal. Not trying to sell anybody on site, not trying to do even the softest of selling. That was absolutely not what they wanted. So that became kind of easy for us and difficult all at the same time. We needed to be very focused on all of our visual collateral. So we needed to make sure that everything on site for race weekend looked incredible, looked immaculate, looked cohesive, whether it was an information kiosk that was, 400 meters away from the start line, or whether it was the start line. We needed to make sure that our social media was really on point in terms of color, logo, message, that sort of thing. And that's quite different than some of our presenting sponsors. So for example, I'll take autos, for example. As a presenting sponsor, it was really important that those cars were front and center. So we used them as lead vehicles for all of our events, that we had them on display at the Health and Fitness Expo, that we had interactive ambassadors who were part of the run community day to day throughout the year that would be advocates for both the BMW and the Subaru brand. So there was a lot of brand affinity, but a lot of touch points actually with the products, very different from Tamarack. So we had to be really mindful of the differences between some of these players. To the same degree with ASICS shoes, which to most people are, a running shoe company that's been around for decades and decades, a venerable Japanese running shoe company that's been around. But really within their corporate structure, they had recently acquired a running app brand called Runkeeper, and it was really important for them to have a presence in the digital world. So we did a lot of work with ASICS to bring in complimentary free training plans to our participants so that they would be really well supported in the journey leading up to Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend. They would have these amazing, robust training plans that they could access for free through the Runkeeper platform. Again, part of that sort of digital campaign that ASICS was working on as they matured their brand in the running industry. So every one of our partners really wanted to touch something a little bit different in each of our participants. And I think first and foremost, it's almost a given, and to say this probably is important. It's not about going and trying to extract the most amount of money that you can out of a potential sponsor. What it's about, going back to what I said earlier, is understanding the inventory that you have to sell. So when we talk about inventory in our own case, we talk about some of these sub-events that we can provide presenting sponsorship opportunities. But that now branches out into a whole bunch of activation pieces. Like with ASICS and Runkeeper, this was these free training plans that we could initiate. With Autos, it was what we created, which was the Autos Power Crew. They were a group of sort of social media influencers that were tied to the Subaru and BMW brand, who were running in the community, posting stories on social media. So, each of these little inventory pieces that we could sell had some great activation. And I think aligning a potential sponsor's brand with our brand, the mutual benefits from a customer or a participant that they feel has a resonance with their brand needs to resonate with our brand as well. So I'll give you an exact opposite of what that looks like. So we've had many internal conversations about whether we would take sponsorship money, for example, from a marijuana manufacturer selling company. The answer is no, doesn't align with our brand. We've been approached recently by the burgeoning online betting market, and would we like to take on some sponsorship in the online betting world? Absolutely not. Is there significant money from both of those potential partners there? I think so, but at what cost? Everything that you do when you're looking to work with sponsors has to be a brand aligned piece, or it just, the actual money and cash that you bring in is insignificant compared to the damage that it could provide to your brand. So really making sure that alignment is super solid, and understanding what it is that not only with the piece of inventory you've sold to a potential partner or sold to that partner, what do they want to do with it? So what can you now do to best highlight their brand, to bring their brand closer to our participant base throughout really almost an entire calendar year? And so when you kind of look at the next phase and you get into, how do you actually make this happen on a day-to-day basis? The next piece is really, and early in the process, tying together both marketing teams from either your festival or your event, and tying them together with the marketing team from that new sponsor, so that right away that flow of ideas can go back and forth. Obviously, a number of the high-level details are covered in the contractual process, which is a really, really important process. All of the partnerships and sponsorship arrangements that we put in place, we draw up the contracts. We ask if it's okay if we do the contract drawing, and I think we do it at our own cost and expense. But I think all of the partners that we brought on board over the last 3 years have all been okay with that, and that really helps us define what some of the high-level deliverables are going to be. And that process really starts with what we call a term sheet. So as we start having one-on-one conversations, whether it's over lunch with a potential partner, whether it's on a Zoom call, as we start talking about things, we're creating really just a list of things that we hear from that partner. So things that they would really like to have us do for them, things that we can do for them, what can they do for us? And we create over the course of that conversation a term sheet. And normally before we go to the contractual process, we pass that back over to our partner to vet that term sheet. And then that goes to our lawyer, who then produces a contract around that. I think if you're looking at sort of pitfalls and mistakes, one of the things that I've seen in our own organization prior to the last 2 or 3 years is not having a real good, solid understanding of who's going to do what and when for each other. Do I think that it's realistic to say that absolutely every detail of a long multi-page contract that has responsibilities on both sides is going to be executed to the letter every year, year after year? No. But I know we've been in situations 4 or 5 years ago where we seemed to not do, 30% of the things we were supposed to do, but then we did things that we weren't supposed to do. And I think if you have, and we'll talk about how you report and how you figure out if there's success within your sponsorship world, within your event. But I think making sure that the term sheet is really well defined early on is super, super important, because it's a mutual process. It's a back and forth process. So there's no surprises in that term sheet about things like, could be as mundane as, how many social media posts do you do a month on behalf of that particular partner? Who is responsible for producing any of the collateral on course? So we use a lot of scrim, a lot of banners, a lot of physical signage needs to be created. Who's paying for that? How much of it are you going to do? Exactly the number of feet that you're going to produce. All of those things, if you do on the front end, then you have a real good process for monitoring it on the back end. So a term sheet is really important before you go to contract. And I would recommend to any event who's looking for sponsorship to take control of the contractual process. Because if you don't, you're going to run into problems when you need to produce a report, a success report on the event. When you're going through the process of feeding back to your partner, you'll have a difficult time really being able to showcase some of the things that you were supposed to do, or maybe some of the things that you didn't do. So then once we have a contract in place, then we continue to work with our own marketing team to start spreadsheeting that contract. So what things are we supposed to be doing? What things are our partners supposed to be doing? What do the timelines look like? So for Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend, we typically open the registration process about middle September, and then of course our events at the end of May. So we have this long window to activate on behalf of all of our partners and sponsors. So when are we supposed to be doing these things? And what exactly are we supposed to be doing? So we spreadsheet that meticulously with timelines, so that we know on any given week exactly what day a post is going to go out for this particular partner, We have check-in meetings scheduled within there so that there's no ambiguity around when these things are supposed to happen. And that's, again, really, really important. So your marketing team needs to have a real fulsome handle on timelines, processes, internally, who's doing this. Everybody needs to be really well aligned on that. So the worst case you could ever be in is to have your sponsor or partner come back and say, I haven't seen you post anything for 2 weeks. Like, what's going on? You never want to be in that position. You want to be proactive. You want to show that you're the lead in that relationship. And you'll be rewarded for that, because on the back end, it becomes really easy to be able to feed back to your partner exactly what you did. So we do a number of things in that process. At the end of race weekend, we do a pictorial or sort of a history book of the arc of the last 9 months for each and every partner that we have. Obviously, the work we do for Tamarack is more detailed than it would be for one of our nutrition partners who does a lot of in-kind for us, but a small amount of cash. But we feed back for every one of our partners. We give them a pictorial, a historical look at all of the things that they would want to see, particularly on course. We do a deep dive into social media impressions, open rates to any of the emails that we would have sent to participants that had content that was germane to that particular sponsor or partner. All of those things go into a book that we create for each of our partners. We don't wait for them to ask for that. We present it usually, for us is fairly quick. We do that in July. So we work on that right away post-event. And so that they have that in hand. And then we follow up always with a phone call, a meeting, right away, just to sort of get their impressions on what they saw. What did they think of the experience that they got? Do we need to go back and look at some of the deliverables in the contract? Are there things that worked really well, or are there things that didn't work well? And I think that's a really important piece, because you can envisage a whole bunch of things you can do for a partner or a sponsor, but when you actually see it activated, some of those things are like, we don't want to ever do that again. That just didn't work. And there's some things that you'll see along the way that you didn't do because they weren't really part of what you were supposed to do, but you think, maybe I'm going to pitch that, between seasons so that we can talk about maybe doing that next year. So that's, being proactive, and then looking for ways to enhance the relationship as you move forward. Most of the things won't require a change in the contract. That normally never happens, but everybody mutually agrees that there might be a different pathway to execute some of these particular deliverables. And I think that's a really important part of how we do that. Communication is absolutely everything. If, I'm getting an email out of the blue from a sponsor, or I'm getting a phone call, it's too late at that point. We take the position that we don't want them to be thinking about the relationship. We want them to be completely comfortable with the relationship. We want to be steering the ship. We want to appear to be so confident and so, engaged with their brand every day that we get up and go to work, that if they're calling us, we probably haven't done their job. I think that's super, super important. And I know throughout my time here speaking to you today, I've used the word sponsor a lot. We refer to our sponsors as partners because they truly are partners. Again, they need to be able to add value to our participants. Their brands need to resonate with our participants. They need to be intrinsically woven into the fabric of our event so that, all of our participants, when they're looking to shop, looking to buy a service of any kind, and one of those happens to be our partner, that it's a seamless thing. I participate in Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend. Wow, why would I run in anything else other than ASICS shoes? I'm home buying. I'm going to look at a Tamarack home first. I'm car shopping. So all of those things are really intentional, and they're our partners. Sure, they pay us, but we provide a set of deliverables that we think are unparalleled and that provide more dollar value than the sponsor actually or partner actually puts into the arrangement. And that brings me back to investing in your partnership sponsorship program in your organization. I think also it's important just to talk about the resourcing that a team needs to be able to really execute on a solid partnership program. So as I'd mentioned a couple of times, we brought on a sponsorship consultant, and thankfully the cost of doing that is usually a commission of some kind. In our case, we pay a small retainer to our partnership consultant, and then we pay a percentage of what they bring to the table. So we feel that keeps that particular partner consultant engaged. If you can afford to pay that sort of small retainer, I think there's value in that, but there's also value in paying a little more on the percentage side. Really important is having the marketing resources in place to make that happen. After you've got this successful relationship in place and ready to go, you really want to be able to get your marketing team. And I use the word team. I know it sounds, like we have 50 people doing that, but we really only have 3 full-time resources working again on that whole marketing piece. And I think that's a lot for some organizations. I think if it's essential that you have one person in your organization working on that piece full time. But again, I've seen smaller organizations do that on a contractual basis. So remember, if you're doing this really well and you've got your consultant in place, they're bringing you really good partnership opportunities to the table. You're investing in this as a program, right? So you're investing in that partnership consultant to begin with. You're also investing in a marketing team to be able to execute on that. So let's look at a numerical example. When I started here at Run Ottawa, working at Tamarack Ottawa Race Weekend specifically, we had about probably 8% of our operating budget came from sponsorship dollars. Kind of low. Marquee events in our industry like Boston Marathon, New York City Marathon, that are premier large events, of which we are a large event, largest in Canada, one of the largest in North America. They run a little closer to 25% of their operating budget comes from sponsorship dollars. So we've been able to, in the last 3 years, bring that up to about 17 or 18% of our budget. Now, you could say it's worth spending 4 or 5% of that money out of that gap of almost 10% that you've now gone and extended, and spending 4 or 5% of that on resourcing the marketing that you need and resourcing some of the pieces that you need to make that happen. I think you have to look at it as a program. You have to look at it as a standalone piece with a profitability tied to it, and you've got to resource it properly. Thanks for your time today. I hope it's been informative and helpful.
And that wraps up this episode of FestForward Advisor Talks, presented by the Ottawa Festival Network. We acknowledge the support of the Canada Council for the Arts in the making of this podcast. All of the resources and links mentioned throughout this episode will be available in the episode show notes, as well as transcriptions in both French and English. For more information on OFN and our members, please check us out online at ottawafestivals.ca. And if you have any questions or feedback around this podcast, you can send us an email at festforward@ottawafestivals.ca. Thank you so much for listening, and please remember to subscribe to FestForward Advisor Talks to catch future episodes where we dive into even more hot topics festival and event organizations need to know to support and grow their organizations. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your colleagues and friends and leave us a review. That's all for now. Stay tuned and stay festive.